Welcome to Civil Rights Training for CACFP, Family Daycare Home, and Summer Feeding for fiscal year 2022. The purpose of this presentation is to establish and convey policy and to provide guidance to USDA, food and nutrition service recipients and customers concerning civil rights. In doing so, we hope to ensure compliance against discrimination in all nutrition programs and activities. The authority to enforce civil rights compliance is established through various acts and title programs. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination based on race, color, and national origin in programs and activities receiving federal financial assistance. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in all services except public transportation services. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 prohibits discrimination based on sex under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibits discrimination based on disability. Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987 clarified the scope of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by specifying all of the recipients of federal funds must comply with civil rights laws in all areas, not just in the particular program or activity that received the federal funding. The Age Discrimination Act of 1975 prohibits discrimination based on age in programs or activities receiving federal financial assistance. You will see the newest revision through the Office of Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights Policy staff. All USDA Food and Nutrition Services assistance programs are prohibited from discriminating based on race, color, national origin, age, sex, and disability. The instruction is applicable to all programs and activities of a recipient of federal financial assistance, whether those programs and activities are funded in whole or not. Sometimes programs or certain parts of programs are established to assist a certain groups, such as children, the elderly, pregnant and lactating mothers, etc. Should congressional legislation specify or set restrictions on program eligibility, those provisions take precedence over certain established guidelines. A few definitions or terminology used in civil rights training and guidance is discrimination. Discrimination is different treatment that makes a distinction of one person group from others. An applicant is a person who applies in writing, electronically, verbally, or through a designated representative for participation in a USDA Food and Nutrition Service federally assisted program. Assurance is a contractual agreement in which a state agency, local agency, or other recipient legally agrees to administer food and nutrition service program benefits in accordance with all laws, regulations, instructions, policies, and guidance related to non-discrimination in delivery of their program. Civil rights is defined as the non-political right of a citizen or the personal liberty guaranteed to U.S. citizens by the 13th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution. A complainant is a person or group of persons who allege discrimination in the delivery of program benefits or services by a state agency, a local agency, or other recipient. A corrective action plan is a plan described the actions to be taken to resolve any noncompliance with civil rights regulations, instructions, policies, and guidelines. The Office of Civil Rights is the organizational unit reporting to the Office of Secretary of Agriculture, who actually administers our programs to assure equal opportunity and non-discrimination for all persons in all aspects of USDA programs. The United States Department of Agriculture created a regulation on July 9, 2004 to ensure the elimination of unwarranted barriers to the participation of faith-based organizations in USDA programs to ensure that no organization will be discriminated against in a USDA program based on religion. It is to ensure that USDA-funded programs are available to all regardless of the religion. This regulation ensures a level playing field for the participation of faith-based organizations, other community organizations in USDA programs. It allows a participating religious organization its independence, provided that USDA funds do not support any religious activities such as worship or instruction. It also clarifies that these organizations can use space in their facility to provide USDA funded services without removing any religious art, icons, scriptures, or religious symbols. Limited English proficiency. Who are persons with LEP? Individuals who do not speak English as their primary language and who have a limited ability to read, speak, write, or understand English because of their national origin. Recipients of federal financial assistance have a responsibility to take reasonable steps to ensure meaningful access to their programs and activities by persons with LEP. Failure to provide meaningful access to persons with LEP could be discrimination on the basis of national origin. Within the Title VI of Civil Rights Act of 1964 are established non-discriminations based on national origin. State and local agencies that fail to provide services to limited English proficiency LEP potential eligible persons or deny them access to programs and activities may be discriminating on the basis of national origin. Therefore, we must take steps to assure meaningful access to the information and services we provide. What actually constitutes reasonable steps to ensure access is contingent on several factors. Those factors to be considered include the number or proportion of LEP persons eligible to served or likely to be encountered by the program. So the greater the number, the more likely language services are needed. Examination of prior experience with LEP persons will help determine how broad the scope of language services needs to be. These groups may have been underserved in the past because of existing language barriers. Agencies should assess the frequency of contact with LEP individuals seeking assistance, as well as frequency with particular languages. Keep in mind to take care to consider whether having the appropriate outreach in place for certain LEP persons could actually increase the frequency of contact with those different groups. The more important the activity, information, service, or program, or the greater the possible consequences of the contact to LEP individuals, the more likely language services are needed. An example of this would be like an ambulance. Finally, the resources you have available to you to reach the LEP persons may allow reasonable steps to not be cost efficient when the cost exceeds the benefit. Be sure to explore the most cost-effective ways of delivering competent and accurate language services. Facilities are required to provide translation of vital documents, interpretation services, and staff training regarding how to provide LEP population with meaningful access. When providing language services, applicants and participants cannot be asked to bring their own interpreter or use their children as their interpreter. You must be qualified, competent language resources is what must be used. Some examples of these services are qualified, competent bilingual staff, telephone interpreter lines, oral interpretation services, written language services, and qualified, competent community organizations and volunteers. Subrecipient agreements must also include a civil rights assurance of non-discrimination. An example of this is a facility that contracts with a food vendor to provide food service to the children are responsible for ensuring that the vendor used in the is in compliance with civil rights requirements. These assurances are binding on the program applicant and its assessors, transferees, and assignees, as long as they receive assistance or retain possession of any assistance from USDA. Public notification. All FNS assistance programs must include a public notification system. The purpose of the system is to inform applicants, participants, and potentially eligible persons of program availability, program rights and responsibilities, the policy of non-discrimination, and the procedure for filing a complaint. Now, we do, if you are brand new, you are required to do a public notification, but if you've been on the program for a little bit, we will send out a public release for you every year. But any elements of program public notification, program availability is to inform applicants, participants, and potentially eligible persons of their program rights and responsibilities and the steps necessary for participation. Complaint information, it must advise applicants and participants at the service delivery point of their right to file a complaint, how to file a complaint, and the complaint procedures. And the non-discrimination statement. All information materials and sources, including websites, must contain a non-discrimination statement. The statement is not required to be included on every page of the program website. At a minimum, the non-discrimination statement or a link to it must be included on the home page of the program information. If you post your menu in your daycare center and you do have the poster, the Injustice for All poster, you do not have to put the non-discrimination statement on there. The non-discrimination statement is required if you are handing out your menu outside of your center or facility, or if it is also on your website, that's when you need to make sure the non-discrimination statement is on there. So the state agencies and local agencies, subrecipients must make program information available to the public upon request, prominently display the Injustice for All poster, inform potentially eligible persons, applicants, participants, and grassroots organizations of programs or changes in programs, provide appropriate information in alternative formats for persons with disabilities, and then the appropriate languages for persons with LEP. Convey the message of equal opportunity in all photos and other graphics that are used to provide program or program related information. So just make sure if you are even creating materials to send out, again, the non-discrimination statement on there, and these are other things to think about to do if you are sending out information regarding CACFP or anything to do with our program. This is the USDA Civil Rights Authorized Statement for FY fiscal year 2021 to 2022. Modifications are allowed only when agencies are issuing joint materials, and then those modifications must be approved by USDA FNS. For all child nutrition programs, this is the statement that you will use, and it is found in the training manual and in the resource library. So just a reminder, if you are collaborating with another federal program, you can do a kind of a hybrid to make sure everything's in there for both non-discriminations. But if you are only sending stuff out for a USDA program, FNS, which is Food and Nutrition Services, this is the non-discrimination statement that you will use. This is the second part of it. It is rather lengthy. Again, you will find this in the training manual. And here is the last section of the non-discrimination statement. It is a three-part. We have it broken up into 3 different slides. So at a minimum, the full version of the non-discrimination statement must be on the application forms, which they are already on there. That is already provided. You don't have to do anything to the application. Any notifications of eligibility or ineligibility, which since you do not send out a letter to parents, you do not have to worry about this. Any of your web page So again, if you have a menu on your web page, it needs to be on the web page, and any public information, including any program literature. So again, anything that is regarding CACFP that you send out, even if it's just a brochure to tell people about the program, the non-discrimination statement does need to be on there, the full version, and you can shrink it down as small as you need to get it to fit on the page. Now, the short version of the non-discrimination statement can be used in special circumstances. You may just not have room at all. And in that case, then you can put the only line is this institution is an equal opportunity provider. The only thing you need to remember with this, though, is now you can take the large one and you can shrink it down. This institution is an equal opportunity provider must be in the same font size or larger than the smallest font on the page. So if you have a menu posted online and it has 10-point font, 12-point font, and 14-point font, you need to make it larger than the 10-point font. It can't be the smallest font. It has to be in a much larger font so people can see that. Translations for the non-discrimination statement can be found on the FNS Civil Rights Division website, and we have that information right here. So you can go to the website if you do need the non-discrimination statement in another language. This is a copy of the Injustice for All Center. This does need to be displayed in a prominent location in your facility. Civil rights training is required so that individuals involved in all CACFP programs that receive federal financial assistance understand federal law, regulation, instructions, policies, and other guidance. Really, if you're on CACFP, we just suggest that you train everybody at your facility because everybody is probably a little bit involved with CACFP. If your teachers are help serving, that's part of CACFP. We just suggest that everybody at your center do a civil rights training just to be on the safe side to make sure everybody receives the information that is needed. Just as you are participating in this training, certain trainings are required in order to comply with civil rights guidelines. Again, training is required so that people involved in all levels of CACFP understand civil rights related to laws, regulations, procedures, and directives. Persons responsible for reviewing civil rights compliance must receive training to assist them in performing their review responsibilities. We, as a state agency, we must train our agency staff as well, as long as schools must do their personnel. This is actually for every single program that we have for CACFP. Annual training is required. New employees must receive civil rights training before participating in program activities, and any volunteers must receive training appropriate to their roles and responsibilities as well. But as a rule of thumb, we just say that we think it's a good idea if everybody has civil rights training. So all staff should receive training on all aspects of civil rights compliance, including but not limited to collection and the use of data, effective public notification system, complaint review procedures, and resolution of noncompliance. Requirements for reasonable accommodations of persons with disabilities, requirements for language assistance, conflict resolution, and customer service, which all of that we are covering today. So state agencies and facilities are required to obtain data by race and ethnic category on all potentially eligible students in their area. When you get the data, you do send that to us, and it is in your online application agreement. Respect for individuals' dignity should always guide the processes and methods for collecting the data on race and ethnicity. Both ethnicity and race must be obtained, and all civil rights information and documentation as the other documents must remain on file for 3 years. Now, families are not required to furnish race and ethnicity information unless it's necessary to determine the applicant's eligibility to receive a benefit or the amount that the participant may be entitled to receive. So you do ask the family for this information on the application and agreement when you determine if they're free, reduced, and paid. There is a section on there for the parent to fill out. Ideally, respondent self-identification should be facilitated to the greatest extent possible, and recognizing that in some data collection systems, observer identification is often more practical. FNS believes also that self-ID or self-reporting could be the best method, but they're now stating that you can no longer, they want the parents and the family to self-report. That is the best method per FNS. Therefore, applicants should be encouraged to provide the information to you on the application. In other words, that is requested solely for the purpose of determining that you, the institution, is in compliance with federal civil rights laws. They should also be assured that their response will not affect consideration of the application for the program, and the information is protected with the Privacy Act. The person collecting the data may not second guess the applicant or in any other way change or challenge a person's self-declaration, as it is to his or her race and ethnicity background, unless the declaration is patently false. But I would definitely just not mess with anything a parent or a guardian puts on the application, because it is very plausible that a child could be of multiple races, but by vision, it doesn't appear to be that they would be one of those. Should applicants choose not to complete the section on the ethnicity and race, the center is currently not allowed to make visual observation. This is new this year. Once the applications have been reviewed and benefits determined, the signature of the approving officer will confirm the race and ethnicity information. And the approving person is the person at the center. So again, you would use the information that the parent puts on the application in the race and ethnic section. It's not required for them to fill this out. We would like them to fill this out for them to self-identify, but we can no longer, as you as a person at that institution, or even like me, I can't come in and do a visual observation of like, I think they're white, I think they're Alaska Native. Like, I can't determine that visually any longer. So we're going to get more guidance from that with USDA, but that is something that did come down the pike from them. Again, children cannot be surveyed, and questions must be posed to a legal or a legal guardian or a parent. The data may already be part of the enrollment information and provided on file. Again, for centers, the application and agreement, the one that the child to determine if they're free, reduced, or not eligible, is one of the ways used to determine the data that can be collected from the family. So again, the parent may fill that out on the application that they submit to you. They're not required to fill that out. If you are a center or a facility that does not pick up applications, you do not have to give applications out, then you do need to find, and you can create a way of getting that information from a parent, which I don't think we have very many of those, that they do not have to use any application. But if you don't give an application out for parents to fill out, then you do need to come up with a different method. You can create a form to ask that information so parents and families can self-identify their race or their ethnicity. So the race and ethnicity categories must be in a 2-question format. This is to simply provide flexibility and ensure data quality. Ethnicity should appear first on the data form, where the respondent must choose only one of 2 options. Respondent should be offered the option of selecting one or more racial designations. Recommended instructions should accompany the multiple response for race, such as it can say mark one or more, or select one or more, or select all that apply. But on race, they can select definitely more. They can be more than one race. The only designations for collection on ethnicity are Hispanic or Latino and not Hispanic or Latino. Hispanic or Latino is defined as a person of Cuban, Mexican, Puerto Rican, South or Central American, or other Spanish culture or origin, regardless of race. The term Spanish origin can be used in addition to Hispanic or Latino. We're going to go through the actual definitions, and these are definitions that were given by civil rights. So we're going to go through the definition of each one of the races of what it includes. American Indian or Alaska Native is defined as a person having origins in any of the original people of North and South America, including Central America, and who maintain tribal affiliation or community attachment. Asian is defined as a person having origins in any of the original people of the Far East, Southeast Asia, or the Indian subcontinent, including, for example, Cambodia, China, India, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Pakistan, and the Philippine Islands, Thailand, and Vietnam. Black or African American is defined as a person having origins in any of the Black racial groups of Africa. Terms such as Haitian or Negro can be used in addition to Black or African American. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander is defined as a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, or other Pacific Islands. White is defined as a person having origins in any of the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. Now, as shown here on the slide, if you are a center or if any type of facility or institution, you will be able to find a non-discrimination. If anybody has a program discrimination complaint, this is an example of the form right here. You can find this form in the training manual, and the blank form is in the original section. This also can be found in the resource library. It is required that everybody has a program discrimination complaint form. And again, you can use the one that we have created for you. Again, it's in the manual, it's in the original section, it's the blank copy, and you can also find it in the resource library. Complaints or discrimination of applicants or participants allege different treatment based on these protected classes, which is race, color, national origin, age, sex, and disability. And if they do have a program complaint, it's a complaint over CACFP program, and it's they're stating that one of these areas, this is what was discriminated against. So it has to be with CACFP and one of these 6 discrimination origins. Certain procedures must be followed when complaints are alleged. Any person or representative alleging discrimination has the right to file a complaint within 180 days of the alleged discriminatory action. The complainant and the entity that the complaint is filed against will be encouraged to resolve the issue at the lowest possible level and as quickly as possible. All complaints, written or verbal, must be forwarded to the appropriate Office of Civil Rights. Anonymous complaints will be handled to the extent feasible based on the available information. The program discrimination complaint form and directions are again found in the training manual. Verbal complaints require some special steps, but confidentiality is very important. A complaint form may be developed, but again, you can use the one that we have for you in the training manual. The blank form must be kept on site. And again, if it is a verbal complaint, those are separate. Now, a person will fill out the complaint form, and it tells them where to send it to into USDA. It gives them the address. And I believe there's a phone number on there as well for anything that they may want to call into as a verbal complaint. Complaints must be forwarded to FNS Civil Rights within 5 calendar days of receiving the complaint. Complaints based on age must be forwarded to FNS Civil Rights Division within 5 working days of the receipt of that complaint. Civil rights complaints must be maintained in a log separate from other program complaints. And I will be honest with you, I've been on staff for 13 years, and I have not heard of a complaint being filed yet. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but if in case you do need, because it is so uncommon, if you do need assistance with this, you can reach out to your consultant or to us, and we can help you with this process. At the time of any routine review or audit, civil rights records are always within that review. Also reviewed at the time will be any complaint activity and training session documentation. As you can see from the slide, USDA Regional Office reviews the state agency, and then we, as a state agency, we come out and review you. Look at the items to be determined in the review when we come out to see you. Upon reviewing Centers for Compliance with Civil Rights guidance, reviewers will determine whether potentially eligible persons and households have an equal opportunity to participate in the CACFP program. Reviewers must determine that benefits are not done by race or ethnic origin. If the USDA non-discrimination poster is displayed in a visible location, and we look for any correct non-discrimination statement on all printed materials that are distributed to the public. Determination must be made if all program materials and information is made available to all potentially eligible families and includes any need for limited English proficient persons. Reviewers will check to see if the applicant racial and ethnic data are being collected and are maintained on file for 3 years. All complaints must be handled in accordance with procedures outlined within the FNS guidance and instructions, and documentation of civil rights training conducted for staff members has been done, and the topics that were presented and trained on. And again, the civil rights training is required to be done every year. So anytime somebody new comes onto CACFP, we do come out and do an approval visit, and that's done by the state agency. Through the questions used on this visit, civil rights information is obtained or conveyed from and to the personnel. Appropriate signatures are obtained and submitted of the visitation. So when we do come out to do an approval visit, we do give you your poster at that point in time, and we do go over civil rights with you. So if you're like, I don't have, if you're brand new, we do come out and bring you your poster, and we talk about this with you. So don't get too worried about civil rights and getting that information, because we will bring all that information to you. Centers are bound by their agreement to compile civil rights data, and you just get, whenever you do get these applications back from parents, if it's on there, that's when you compile that information. You need to maintain your records for 3 years, and then permit authorized child nutrition program USDA personnel only to review those records. During the routine administrative review of a center, the state agency is permitted to monitor the center's program for compliance with the agreement, as well as evaluate the data obtained. If violations are found, the Department of Agriculture, FNS, shall have the right to seek judicial enforcement of the agreement. Again, when we conduct a review, which can be every 2 to 3 years, and as most of you know, civil rights is just a small portion of what we do look at when we come out to do a review. So now let's go over guidance of people with disabilities. So USDA memo CACFP 14-2017 supersedes the earlier instruction 783-2 revision 2 and is for both schools and CACFP clients. Changes were made in 2008 to the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is ADA Amendments Act, which was intended to restore the broad scope of the term disability. After the passage, most physical and mental impairments constitute as a disability. So the focus was changed from if the student was disabled to being proactive on working with parents to ensure an equal opportunity to participate in the USDA meals program. A state licensed healthcare professional is any person which is authorized to write medical prescriptions under state law. Within the memo are safeguards to ensure parents and children have all information on how to request meal modifications and the process to resolve any disputes. The memos emphasize that program staff must be made aware of the procedures of handling requests for meal modifications. Centers and sponsors are responsible to ensure parents and children are fully aware of these procedures. The question of whether a child has a disability for the purpose of the memorandum has been simplified by the ADA Amendments Act and shouldn't require extensive analysis. Program staff shouldn't be a part of the determination as to whether it is truly a disability. All federal documents involved in the definition, those being Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, ADA, and USDA regulations, define a person with disabilities as any person who has a physical or mental impairment which substantially limits one or more major life activities, or has a record of such impairment, or is regarded as having such an impairment. Some examples of major life activities are broadly defined and included, such as caring for oneself, performing manual tasks, see, hearing, eating, sleeping, walking, standing, lifting, bending, speaking, breathing, learning, reading, etc. Also included are these operations of major bodily functions, such as functions of the immune system, normal cell growth, digestive, bowel, bladder, normal cell growth, respiratory, circulatory, endocrine, and reproductive functions. The physical or mental impairment need not be life-threatening to constitute a disability. It is enough that it limits a major life activity. Even if medicine or other means reduce the impact of the impairment, it may still be covered as a disability. Whether the impairment constitutes a disability must be determined on a case-by-case basis. The determination must be made with regard to whether medicine, etc., can reduce the impact of the impairment. So a good example of this would be, we say, like being lactose intolerant. So before this in 2008, it was not considered it's not life-threatening, but now it falls under the new, if it does physically or impair them, or can cause what we talked about, breathing, speaking, endocrine, bowel, digestive, anything like that is now considered a disability, even though it is not life-threatening. In the past, we considered a person with a disability when it comes to food related would be life-threatening, which that is not the case any longer. State and local offices must provide reasonable modifications in policies and practices to applicants and participants with disabilities when necessary. A reasonable modification must be funded through state or local offices, not by the applicants and participants. Require good communication between all parties involved. Provide the same level of service to applicants and participants in an alternative way. So, again, it would be funded by you, the center. It can't be from the parent if they are needing any medical adjustments. The decision to provide modifications to the meals for children with disabilities is to be made on a case-by-case basis, but that decision can only be considered when supported by a written statement from a licensed healthcare professional. Therefore, meals with modifications are not reimbursable without the written statement. If the changes requests do not follow the program meal patterns, the changes must be accompanied with a medical statement. If the changes requested can be made without altering the program meal patterns, program operators may choose to not require the medical statement. To be sure of compliance with USDA guidance, request the statement to be safe, especially if the request is at least a bit confusing. An example of a medical statement can also be found in the training manual. When making substitutions and modifications to meal patterns, there are some items to remember. Program operators are not required to provide the specific substitution products requested. An example is a brand name. Participants must be offered a reasonable modification that effectively accommodates the child's disability and provides equal opportunity to participate in or benefit from the program. Should the operators be asked to make modifications that fundamentally alter the nature of the program, contact the state agency for assistance. Remember, the emphasis should be on working with parents and guardians to develop an appropriate that will be effective for the child. So an example of this is, say you have a child that cannot have gluten and you're having hamburgers that day. It is required for you to offer them a grain per the meal pattern requirements, but is not required for you to offer them a bun. So that means is you can have all the kids have a bun, a regular bun with gluten. If maybe you have a gluten-free child, you can eliminate the bun, but say that you offer chips like Doritos that are made with corn, that could be the substitution. Or maybe you do another grain that they can have that you like, maybe you give them rice instead because rice is gluten-free. So as long as they have a grain, the grain does not have to match what all the other children have. They do have to have the grain, but it has to be gluten-free. So you don't have to go out and buy gluten-free buns. You just have to substitute it for an item that would be the same meal pattern requirement and that would accommodate their needs. So I hope that makes a little bit clearer. So you don't have to go out and buy all this expensive stuff. You can use what you already have on hand if that's permissible. If you have stuff on hand, then you can do that as well. Or maybe you do buy gluten-free bread. You can use the gluten-free bread as a bun. You don't have to specifically go buy gluten-free buns. Gluten-free buns. Other items to keep in mind when accommodating modification requests include the following. Exclusion of any child from the program environment is not considered an appropriate or reasonable modification. An example is you can't sit in the hallway during the service of breakfast because you can't use the peanut allergy table for punishment for misconduct. So like if you have a peanut allergy table, again, you can't use it for anything but for peanut allergies, not as anything else. Any modifications made because of disabilities will continue to be reimbursed at the rate appropriate for that child. So either they'll still get reimbursed at the free, reduced, and paid rate. We do not pay more if a child has a disability. No extra charges are to be assessed of parents because of the extra efforts for the needs for their child because of the disability. All facilities must be made accessible for the children and at the expense of the program operator. Any feeding equipment or aids to assist the child with eating must be provided and are acceptable uses of child nutrition funds. So next we have is conflict resolutions and customer service. What is meant by conflict resolution? Conflict resolution is simply a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement. Why should we need to resolve any conflict? Several reasons exist as to why that include to come to an agreement that benefits all parties. There is the need to understand more about the people whose ideas, beliefs, and backgrounds may be different from our own. The resolution is necessary to ensure that our relationship with opponents continue to grow. And above all, it is needed to find peaceful solutions to difficult situations. There are certain steps to resolving conflict. In order to do so, the parties must understand the conflict truly is, communicate with the opposition, then brainstorm possible solutions to the problem. Use an impartial mediator if needed, explore any alternatives that are arrived at, learn to cope with stressful situations and pressure tactics, then finally choose the best resolution to that conflict. It has been said that good customer service is made up of 80% attitude and of those involved and 20% technique and delivery of the service. It is also a mixture of knowledge about the issue or business, as well as how to practice good customer service. It is important to remember customer service is not a smile campaign. A smile will not take care of all situations. Attitude is the way we perceive things and situations in our lives. It can be positive as well as negative. It is necessary to show a positive attitude while dealing with customers. Positive attitude brings confidence and energy into a person, as well as helps a person to cope with stress and problems in a better way. Along with having a positive attitude, other rules include not to make promises unless you will keep them. Listen to your customers and remember you do not only with your ears, but with your eyes also. Let the customer talk and then show him or her you are listening. Acknowledge what the person has to say. Ask them questions and then listen. Avoid the "I don't know" answer without an option to give them. When the answer to the issue is no, be sure to say that in a positive manner. Well, we have concluded today's civil rights training. Thank you guys for being with us today, and you have a fabulous fiscal year 2021 and 2022.